Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Unified Endpoint Management, Enhancing User Freedom and Productivity in the Age of Mobility. My name is Raleigh Gould and I will be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speakers are Steve Brasen, Managing Research Director at Enterprise Management Associates, and Kimber Spradlin, Product Marketer for Endpoint Manager at IBM. Steve's career at EMA follows 19 years of experience in IT system support, engineering, and management for high technology, telecommunications, and financial institutions. Steve's primary focus at EMA includes endpoint systems management, desktop virtualization, mobile management, and data center infrastructure management. Kimber works in IBM Endpoint Manager Product Marketing, specializing in systems management, cost savings ROI, and security best practices. She is a frequent public speaker on the topics of database security, information security policy, and information security regulations. And before I hand things over to our featured speakers, I did want today's audience to know that Steve and Kimber will be taking your questions at the conclusion of today's event. Feel free to log those at any time using the Q&A functionality located in the right-hand column of your screen. Today's event is also being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback as well as a PDF of the speaker slides. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Steve Brasen. Steve?
Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for our presentation on Unified Endpoint Management, where we'll be discussing established and emerging best practices in supporting enterprise user devices, including smartphones, tablets, laptops, and desktops, with a particular focus on enabling workforce mobility. First, just a quick look at the agenda for my portion of the presentation. We'll start with a brief review of the role of client computing and how management practices have evolved to meet constantly changing enterprise requirements, with particular insights on how workforce mobility has drastically changed the way business professionals interact with IT resources. We'll also look at the challenges created by these enterprise requirements to supporting mobility, many of which are not often recognized or even considered. We'll describe how to resolve these challenges with the adoption of unified endpoint management processes that enable increased workforce flexibility and productivity while reducing administrative efforts and costs. And this will lead us into providing an actionable guide on the essential processes and automation tools necessary to achieve a unified endpoint management solution. And finally, I'll sum it all up with just a few concluding thoughts. So we talk about client computing all the time, but what exactly do we mean by a client? Well, it's simply any computing device employed by an end user to perform job tasks. Sometimes we also talk about endpoint computing, but an endpoint is really a wider range of devices and includes servers, where a client is specifically an end user device. Now, in the early days of computing, a client was just a terminal connected to a centralized server or mainframe. It was often called a dumb terminal because it really didn't do anything other than display information delivered from the server or mainframe. And today, we call these devices thin clients or zero clients. They operate over a network rather than a direct connection, but the basic concept is the same. On the mainframe, and thanks to IBM, by the way, terminal computing was enhanced by the introduction of virtualization, which allowed each terminal to operate as if it was connected to its own computer. And this technology survives today as desktop and application virtualization, which we'll discuss a bit later, as they are both increasingly relevant to delivering business IT services to clients. In the 1980s, all this changed, however, with the introduction of the personal computer. These were initially desktop systems that were adopted by enterprises to support accounting processes and word processing. But use cases truly exploded when graphical interfaces were introduced, first by Apple and then later by Microsoft. And as the technologies improved, smaller, more portable versions of the PC entered the market, and then were the first truly mobile computing devices, the laptops. As many of you will likely recall, the smaller and lighter the laptops became, the more popularly they were adopted until around the turn of the 21st century, when they surpassed the desktops as the dominant form of client computing. And it wasn't long after this that the enterprise client computing market would experience yet another significant shakeup with the introduction of the smartphone. Research in Motion introduced the first BlackBerry smartphone in 2003, and the platform grew significantly in popularity thanks to its ability to send and retrieve email. This was a milestone for the business use of smartphones as enterprises began adopting BlackBerry devices to replace antiquated pager systems, as they provided a far superior method for ensuring personnel were contactable. But it really wasn't until Apple's introduction of the iPhone in 2007 that the mobile device revolution truly began. Thanks to its ease of use and quickly expanding software library, the iPhone was popularly adopted by home consumers and then brought into businesses to help them with their job tasks. And this popularity led to an explosion of iPhone-like platforms, most notably the devices built on Google's Android operating system that was introduced towards the end of 2007. Not content with just the iPhone success, Apple made another huge leap with the release of the iPad in April 2010, and Apple continues to dominate the tablet market space with that solution, but not without competition from Android and, most recently, Windows-based tablets. Now, the reason I'm rehashing all this history, of which you're all probably well aware, is to place it in context with the management processes that have evolved to support these changing client computing requirements. With terminal computing, there really wasn't much management of the client device, since all the data and applications resided on the server or mainframe. And in fact, this is the same advantage that can be attributed today to the adoption of desktop and application virtualization. But with the introduction of desktop and laptop PCs, each client device needed to be managed independently, and the leading systems management vendors responded by delivering automated platforms for what we call client lifecycle management. That is, supporting all PC administrative processes from initial deployment through final retirement. These processes included asset management, provisioning, application management, patching, configuration management, problem management, service management, security, and automated solutions supporting a variety of other support processes. After smartphones and tablets became available, however, management platforms for these devices were also introduced, but along a completely separate development path. And the first real mobile management platform was the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, or BES system, that was introduced by RIM to deliver email and messaging content. Beyond this, however, most of the early MDM solutions were primarily security point products designed to provide specific risk mitigation capabilities onto a limited number of device types. Now, these included features like containerization, lock and wipe, and virus detection. Over just the past 2 years or so, it has become abundantly clear that utilizing separate management processes and platforms for supporting mobile devices, PCs, and desktop and application virtualization is not sustainable due to the rapidly increasing infrastructure complexity and expanding user requirements. So at this point, I just want to pause a minute for a taxonomy sanity check. So just to make sure we're all speaking the same language. I've been talking about PCs and mobile devices, so I want to be clear on what I mean by those. Now, sometimes a PC can refer specifically to a desktop Windows-based system, but I'm using the term to refer to any desktop or laptop system. Technically, a mobile device is any system principally designed for its portability. So technically, this should also include laptops. However, from a systems management perspective, the differences between a mobile device and a PC can be defined by the operating system they run. iOS, Android, BlackBerry, Windows RT, and Pro are all mobile devices, while Windows, Macs, and Linux systems are all PCs. I also want to point out that when I talk about enterprise use of devices, I'm referring to business uses of the devices by organizations of any size. I know enterprises can sometimes refer to large businesses, but I mean any size business. And I'm referring to it as a contrast to the consumer use of the devices, which would be non-business related uses like Angry Birds or Minecraft or something. And it should be no surprise that the enterprise use of mobile devices has just exploded in recent years, right? But despite the sensationalism you may have read in the media, this is not an indication that the PC is going away. Now, according to EMA Primary Research, 98% of all business professionals that regularly utilize a computing device as part of their job are dependent on a laptop or desktop. And 80% of enterprise users employ a PC and at least one mobile device. And what this means is that mobile devices are being adopted to supplement PCs, not replace them. And this is actually common sense if you think about it. While some tasks are ideally suited for the portability of a mobile device, such as email, calendars, web surfing, and note-taking, more complex tasks require the larger, more accessible form factors and faster processing capabilities of a PC. Now, for example, think about creating a graphical presentation or a large spreadsheet or writing an extensive research paper. It's just not practical to perform these tasks on a device as small as a tablet and with limited interfaces. Also, tablets lack graphical cards, large memory caches, fast CPUs, and other system resources necessary to locally run complex applications. So for the foreseeable future, we must accept the fact that we live in a multi-device world where enterprise users will require IT services that are accessible from a variety of endpoints. When we talk about workforce mobility, I know people immediately think about mobile devices, smartphones and tablets. But the concept is actually much broader than that. There are principally two types of mobility, or what I like to call the two faces of mobility. The first is the portability of the device. That is, you carry your business resource with you at home, in the office, at Starbucks, or on vacation in the Bahamas. Your work and applications and data are always with you. Now, this is where smartphone, tablets, and laptops play a critical role. Although if you are going to the Bahamas, I do personally recommend you leave the devices at home, but that's just me. The second type of mobility is the ability to access business resources from any device. Now, for instance, if you're on your home PC and or on your personal tablet, you should have access to the same applications and data that you have on your work laptop. Workforce mobility is about enabling business IT resources to be accessible from any device at any location and at any time. Now, this flexibility of client computing allows end users the freedom to choose which device is most appropriate or convenient at any given time and to perform any work task. And as a result, employees drastically boost their productivity, performing a greater number of tasks, and each with a greater effectiveness. And ironically, because they are able to perform tasks at their own convenience, they typically increase productivity while actually reducing effort. Similarly, end users are also able to respond faster to business requests. Now, this increases the agility of the organization to address customer issues, business challenges, and changing market conditions. And it improves the enterprise overall competitiveness in the marketplace. And enabling workforce mobility also leads to improved employee satisfaction. I mean, let's face it, users have a preference. And in some cases, it's an obsession with using the devices they want to use and in the way they want to use them. Productive, agile, satisfied. Those are the three key goals for achieving a successful workforce. And they're all enabled by mobility. But let's not all hold our hands and sing Kumbaya yet. There are still a number of challenges that need to be overcome before an organization can achieve true workforce mobility. And to begin, end users now require and are often demanding unprecedented access to business IT resources. And these include business applications, including both commercial software and proprietary applications, business data, including both benign and highly sensitive information, and other services such as email, messaging, databases, and remote systems access. All of these business resources must be made available to a variety of endpoints. So for mobile platforms, this means they must be principally available on iOS and Android platforms, and in many enterprises must also be accessible from BlackBerry and Windows 8 mobile device platforms. For PCs, Windows and Mac devices must both be supported, and in some instances, Linux clients as well. It is also important to recognize that these client devices are being used to perform personal tasks as well as business tasks. Now, you've likely heard these called bring your own device or BYOD requirements. It's a common industry term used today. But I'll argue that this is a bit of a misnomer because the challenge is just as applicable to business-owned devices as it is to employee-owned devices. If the endpoint is authorized to be used for both personal and business tasks, regardless of who owns it, the device must be selectively supported. That is, business applications and data must be secured and managed without impacting a user's personal use of the device. And by the way, this is just as applicable to laptops as it is to mobile devices, because laptops are often used for both business and personal tasks, and in some cases are even owned by the employees. Now, considerations also need to be made on how to provision client devices. Although initial operating system deployments may be more applicable to PCs, standardizing operating system configurations to meet enterprise requirements can be applicable to both PCs and mobile devices. Business applications must also be installed and accessible from all the supported system types and all versions of each operating system. This is further complicated by the fact that each operating system and application edition must be regularly patched or updated. And all this information, operating systems, configurations, applications, and patch editions, as well as software license information, needs to be continuously identified and tracked for each device used to perform business tasks. Now, for the unenviable IT administrators out there who have been challenged for years just supporting PCs, these greatly expanded requirements have suddenly made their jobs exponentially harder. To make matters worse, the often inaccessibility of mobile devices makes remote support increasingly difficult. So often end users lack the IT knowledge to configure their own devices, and administrators must blindly talk them through configuring email or business application on devices the administrators themselves may not be familiar with. And then there's security. There's a reason why mobile device management primarily evolved from the security management market space. The small form factor of mobile devices makes them easy targets for loss or theft. In fact, according to our recent research, 1 out of every 8 mobile devices containing business data will be lost or stolen. Sensitive business data could also be compromised if it is on a system owned by a user that has been terminated from employment. Also of concern is the fact that the majority of business data is being shared by users via unsecured delivery methods, and these include email, messaging, Dropbox, and other cloud services. Data can also be copied and shared over physical media like USB drives, taking them completely out of the control of the enterprise. Additionally, by enabling remote access to the business network, a potential point of entry is created that can be exploited to enable unauthorized access to business IT resources. Also, viruses and malware like Trojan horses, worms, and spyware are also critical security violations on both PCs and mobile devices. Organizations that have introduced solutions to monitor and prevent these security risks must also be aware that devices that have been rooted or jailbroken can completely circumvent any automated security processes. And all of these security risks must be mitigated invisibly to the end user, that is, without limiting their access to or productivity with applications and data legitimately necessary for the performance of their job, and also without affecting their ability to perform personal tasks on their device as well. Now, I know it really sounds like a have your cake and eat it too kind of proposition, but there really is a solution to all this. Unified Endpoint Management provides a consolidated method for supporting all client devices employed across the enterprise. Now, the process is not just about extending desktop management services to also support mobile devices or vice versa. It's a fundamental change in client management processes. The key concept is that business applications and data are abstracted from the physical endpoint. These are managed and secured centrally by the enterprise and then made available to the authorized personnel. End users provision the resources through an easy-to-use portal or app store for download or access. The client devices still need to be supported to ensure they are configured to optimally perform the business services, but to a much lesser extent than the traditional client lifecycle management processes. Now, it sounds easy on paper, but as I say, the devil is in the details, and there are a number of considerations necessary for making this actually work. The solution must be flexible to support each organization's unique set of requirements. In fact, some organizations may have multiple sets of requirements to support multiple types of users. Some of these requirements include security and compliance initiatives, the types of operating systems performed, platforms of the devices that are supported, and which business applications, data, and services are going to be made available. For instances, on that last one, applications may be downloaded from a server or from the cloud or application virtualization or a public app store, or they could be web applications. Now, most likely it will be a combination of those, but facilities must be made available to support all the applications applicable to the business from a centralized interface. So there's really no one-size-fits-all management process. The requirements and supporting management solutions must be different for each organization. And any client management solutions that's going to be adopted to support unified endpoint management must be able to support a variety of services to be adopted to individual business requirements. Now, to be even more clear on that point, mobile management point solutions that provide limited functionality are unable to support all the disparate applications, data, and services unique to today's dynamic business IT ecosystem. Another key element is that the solution must be managed centrally. Now, this means a single common management console is used by administrators to monitor and manage mobile and PC devices, applications, data, and business services. The consolidated view allows groups to be created to simplify resource authorization and provisioning. Details on devices, configurations, applications, and licenses must all be collected and stored in a centralized data repository. Now, this creates an end-to-end view of the client support stack that allows for holistic reporting and alarming that enable prompt identification of issues, root cause analysis, proactive problem prevention, and continuous compliant achievement. So basically, a higher performing environment and while reducing efforts, administrative efforts from the support staff. There are several methods for abstracting business applications, data, and other IT services from the client device. Now, all of which by nature separate the business resources from a user's personal resources. The first of these is containerization. Containerization is a software-created environment that operates independent of a device's primary workspace. Any applications or data stored in a container are supported by the business and subject to any enterprise security restrictions. But no elements outside the container are affected by the business. A container can include an entire workspace, a specific set of resources, or an individual application or data element. Virtualization effectively provides the same functionality of containerization. If a client device is virtualized, a separate workspace is created to support business resources. Desktop virtualization can also be employed to house, secure, and manage a user's workspace or on a centralized server, and then allows users to remotely access that workspace from any device they choose. Same resources functioning in exactly the same way on different devices. Similarly, application virtualization is available, but it only hosts and delivers individual software elements rather than whole desktops. With application wrapping, enterprise security and management processes are injected into the actual software code of supported applications. In this way, enterprise requirements can be instantly applied to all supported applications across the client support stack without affecting any of the user's personal applications. And finally, tagging is, well, arguably the weakest of these methods, but it operates by maintaining a list or tagging business applications and data that will be supported by the business. And then any updates or compliance initiatives are applied just to those tagged elements. In regards to achieving security requirements, data loss protection, which is sometimes called data loss prevention or DLP, includes processes for securing critical business information. Now, for instance, to prevent data from being compromised in the event of a loss or stolen device, all business-related applications and files should be locked down to prevent anybody from accessing them or completely wiped from the endpoint. These processes can be employed in the event a user is terminated from the company as well. A secure method for users to share data should also be provided, and unsecured data sharing methods should be restricted. and to ensure any files that do leak out, despite the preventative measures, and to ensure that they're also secured. All data should be encrypted so it is accessible only by authorized personnel. A facility should also be provided to white and blacklist applications, so only approved software is able to be accessed and be used in the business environment. Strong two-factor authentication should also be employed to ensure remote access to business systems is limited to authorized personnel. And often the two factors employed include a tunneling system such as VPN and strong password enforcement. But other methods can also be employed as well, such as network encryption or secure ID cards. User devices should also be continuously monitored to ensure they have not been rooted or jailbroken. Any rooted or jailbroken devices should just flat out be disallowed access to business IT services. And finally, there is that extremely important self-service element to unified endpoint management. Users themselves should have the ability to select and provision applications, data, and other services necessary to perform job tasks on any device they choose. Ideally, a consolidated enterprise application store for all authorized applications will be provided. It's a one-stop shopping for static apps, virtual apps, and web apps with versions applicable to all the supported endpoint platforms. Now, we certainly covered a broad range of topics in our exploration of unified endpoint management in a short period of time, but to sum up some of the key takeaways in our discussion, here's just a few things to consider. Mobile devices are unquestionably being adopted to supplement rather than replace PCs in the enterprise space, and there is no indication that this is likely to change in the foreseeable future. We really do live in a multi-device world, and organizations must adopt methods for securing, managing all devices that are used for business tasks and that are access business resources. Also, rather than trying to drink the ocean by supporting each endpoint individually, a unified management solution should be adopted that allows applications and data to be managed and secured independent of the physical endpoints. And user-centric processes should be employed that allow the workforce the freedom to access business resources with little or no interaction with administrative staff. With these processes and supporting automation management solutions in place, end users are liberated to securely access essential business IT resources on any device they choose, so they can focus on the more critical tasks of achieving enterprise goals. And on that note, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Kimber, who will tell us a little bit about how IBM is helping to achieve these goals. Kimber?
Thank you so much, Steve. That was such a great job of putting things into context. It seems like we've had smartphones, iPhones forever, but it's really, 6 years in the grand scheme of the history of IT and computers is not that much, and yet such an enormous impact. And I think even the iPads, in the 3 years that those have been on the market, have had even more impact on enterprise IT. So I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes or so kind of walking you through IBM's approach and point of view on this topic. And we're really looking at it as a convergence of technologies not just of mobile and desktops, but it is where cloud computing and security intelligence, the smarter infrastructure, all comes together. And when you have that much infrastructure and devices and endpoints coming together, you're going to get a lot of data. And so big data, analytics, interpreting all of that information and helping the organization be mobile and flexible is really where we're focusing as a company. And I think, it doesn't take much. Even fairly small organizations are generating terabytes of data between all the logs and events and alerts, and you're talking 3 to 5 endpoints per employee when you include virtual servers and such, averaging that across your employee base. So small organizations even are experiencing these fairly large and complex problems. So one way to think about that is to think about it in the business process layer versus the operational layer and bringing those together. So the business process layer, that's things like software asset management. Who's allowed, who is licensed for what software? Are we over or under? Those kinds of things. Just managing assets, right? What have we bought? What have we retired? What needs to be updated? And addressing employees' service request needs, problems, and outages, versus the operational layer where you're actually really getting down in and configuring and managing and provisioning, deploying patches and software on the devices themselves. And then, as Steve mentioned, being able to do that across all the different kinds of endpoints in your environment, whether those are, mobile endpoints, your traditional endpoints, purpose-specific devices, as we've all seen, and even bringing together the smarter physical infrastructure, the ATMs, the trains, all of the various meters and such that you have. So first, let's kind of, rather than, as Steve said, trying to drink the ocean, let's take this and tackle it a little bit at a time. And I wanted to emphasize where Steve kind of left off, which is the containerization. So one of the biggest issues that we get asked from our customers all the time is BYOD. Not only do I have all that infrastructure, and yes, I owe, the enterprise has paid for and owns some mobile devices, but there's also BYOD. And it's not just BYOD on phones. It's driven into tablets, which is driven into laptops. I know many of my coworkers own their own MacBook Airs that they use for business purposes within IBM. So being able to containerize that, being able to select from a wide range of choices so that you can apply the right technology to the right employee population. So if it's a full BYOD kind of thing, you've got employees that have a lot of productivity needs. They have enterprise mobile apps for conducting enterprise business. Being able to put an app container that will house their email and protect their attachments and their calendar and provide enterprise control over that workspace. But in some cases, you're likely to have contractors and employees with personally owned devices where the only thing you're worried about is what we call PIM, personal information management, the email, the calendar, the to-do list, those kinds of things. So a lighter weight approach is just to do PIM containers. You also have dual persona operating systems, the BlackBerry 10, Samsung Knox is coming out. Those devices are coming to market. iOS 7, we were looking for some of that, was hoping for a bit more of that in iOS 7, and extending it on into laptops. So flexibility, a range of approaches that you'll have within every organization, and again, being able to accommodate that from a single console. When we're doing all of this, okay, of course, we're adding a lot of complexity, a lot of management, a lot more devices. We've got to minimize the administrative costs. Sheer volume of these devices, they're turning over frequently. They're being replaced every 12 to 18 months, either because they've been lost or the latest version is out. So speeding up and automating the onboarding of those devices, especially if they're personally owned, dealing with them when they've been lost, quickly replacing them, those kinds of things, as well as the apps themselves. One area that I think has not been discussed as much as it should be is the impact of BYOD and mobile devices on the service desk, the help desk. Are there employees trained in these operating systems and platforms, or given the tools they need to abstract away the OS-specific details? Employees are, even if they're personally owned devices, they're going to turn to the enterprise for many issues. I know, for example, you hear a lot in the industry about concerns over battery drain. And it's very difficult on these personally owned devices to determine if that's caused by an app that the employee has loaded or an app that they need for work. and they're going to call the help desk first rather than calling their provider. So is the help desk ready for that integrated ability to see and manage those devices? So add that to your checklist of things to think about, right? And then, of course, multi-platform, right? Bringing that all in. We used to be in an environment, at least on the desktop side, where it was almost entirely Windows, 95, 98% Windows. I would work with a number of customers who, at least on the desktop laptop, were 100% Windows. Now we're seeing a lot more Mac OS X, a little bit of Linux, these laptops, these tablets, these smartphones are all performing similar business functions, so now we're bringing in 3-4 more mobile operating systems. I heard the other day some statistic that there were over 3,000 variants of Android, and not all of them are managed the same. Not all of them have the same management capabilities, configuration capabilities. So a lot of complexity there, as well as integrating all of this into the larger infrastructure picture. So your network management, your security information event management systems, your asset management, CMDBs, service desk, embedding mobile into everything that the organization does. Combining mobile discovery with asset discovery, right? How do you stay on top of a rapidly evolving infrastructure, making sure that all of those assets are accounted for, even the ones that the organization doesn't own? You may want some small level of tracking so that if the employee leaves the organization, you know to disable those licenses, recover those licenses, wipe the corporate portion of the data and apps off of the device. And really managing them from procurement through to retirement. Now this particular thought is more about the organizationally owned assets. So this is a little bit less about BYOD and more the devices that are procured through a more traditional mechanism. So control desk, authorized assets and licenses, what's been deployed, what's maybe in inventory ready to be redeployed, those kinds of things. Reconciling it with authorized assets discovered on the network against the deployed asset inventory. So, you know, those numbers don't always add up. Being able to automate that reconciliation process. Those are some of the benefits that you can enjoy by integrating a unified device management platform all the way up into a service desk and IT asset management system. And really what this enables you to do is deploy a software application worldwide in days because you've got accurate inventory, you've got the ability to reach out and touch all of those assets. Now, of course, when it comes to mobile devices, you have to have some user interaction. Very rarely do you have the ability to push those apps and do a silent install and force the installation onto the device. But again, rolling that out, so more and more as the lines of businesses in your organization procure new business-oriented software, that software is going to come with a mobile version, a client version. It will have an admin console that needs to be deployed, and seamlessly rolling that out to all the end users' devices across the organization so the end users are not staggered where, okay, great, I can get this application and use it on my laptop, but I can't use it on my smartphone or tablet. Or all the iOS users have it, but none of the Android users do. Being able to really push out and do software deployments and IT projects across all devices so that the user experiences a seamless behavior. And providing more value to your customers and to the employees. And what that comes down to is not just unifying across these mobile devices, but also taking just some of the concepts, the usability, the experience of the mobile world and bringing it backwards into the traditional world. delivering an enterprise app store that enables employees, where applicable, to apply apps, self-select, self-service portal across traditional and mobile all at once, right? And keeping track of all of the licensing necessary. Many times the mobile version is free, but not always, and being able to track all of that in one central system so that you're not piecing together reports, you know, that have been exported into CSV or Excel files and trying to merge them together, which can consume a lot of employee time unnecessarily. So what we're looking at here is, as I mentioned before, automated workflows. And just to give you an example, right, of a single workflow or task, an end user requests a piece of software from the App Store. The workflow is initiated. We check the license entitlement. Is that an app that we have some licenses available for? Maybe it's an all-you-can-eat type of license, whatever. Automatically doing approvals based on policy, or running or sending an email out to the person who needs to authorize it. That seems a little silly for an example like you know, an Adobe app, but certainly there are applications out there such as you know, MATLAB and engineering environments that can run thousands of dollars for a single end user. So being able to both automate some applications below perhaps a certain cost threshold or whatever policies you would like to set, and then manually requiring approval on others. Having the runbook call the endpoint management solution to deploy the software, deploying it out, automatically doing a closed loop verification that it did in fact deploy, and updating right back through that workflow that it is now deployed, increment that license count down by one because one of those licenses has been taken, and automatically closing out the ticket. Most of which is invisible to the user and happens very, very quickly. And that's an example of how automation can really speed up this process, provide a very seamless experience for the end user. That's the advanced next generation of IT service management with IBM that sits on our IBM Endpoint Manager platform and the Smart Cloud Control Desk platform, which is Service Desk, IT Asset Management, CMDB. And you can see then endpoint management, of course, spanning systems and security across all the capabilities that you might need across all the devices. So a few links for some additional information, and then let's open this up for Q&A.
Great, thank you, Kimber. As Kimber mentioned, I do encourage you to check out some of these additional resources. They will also be included in the follow-up email that you will receive from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow. If you do have a question for either Steve or Kimber, you can log those now using the Q&A panel. So let's go ahead and jump right into the questions. Starting with you, Steve. A popular question we hear is, do you think mobile devices will ever replace PCs?
Yeah, that is certainly a popular question. You hear a lot in the news about that. Well, and to be honest, I really think this is a matter of semantics, right? The difference between the two, a PC and a mobile devices, are actually already starting to blur. Now, consider that several high-end tablets now look more like laptops, and some of the compact laptops look identical to tablets. And when you put any of these devices in a docking station, it looks like a desktop. And when Apple and Microsoft finally unified their individual operating systems across PC, tablets, and smartphones, now will there really be a difference between the platforms? Now, I believe ultimately we will simply have client devices of different sizes without any clear delineation between them. But before we get there, I expect there's going to be numerous stages of new device introductions and changing platforms, which just makes the enterprise support of heterogeneous platforms that much more essential.
Great, thanks, Steve. Now let's jump over to you, Kimber. One question that came in is compliance reporting for things like PCI, HIPAA, SOX, et cetera, a big issue for mobile devices? What are you seeing?
It should be. I don't get that question as often as I would like to hear it. The regulations, as far as compliance reporting goes, are device agnostic. They just say any place you have, regulated data as defined by these guidelines, you need to secure the device. You need to maintain a security configuration baseline, and they don't really advise exactly what those parameters are because they change frequently. So at a regulatory level, they're device agnostic, which means that all these mobile devices are covered. And when it comes to compliance reporting and doing compliance audits, organizations very much should be including them in that analysis. Anytime you've got the ability to send an attachment in an email down to a device, which can be controlled. If you're in a highly, highly regulated environment, you can just prevent that from happening if that's the easiest way to do it. The employee backlash tends to be pretty harsh on that one. That's kind of another reason to go with a unified platform so that you're not submitting, well, here's my compliance results for my laptops, my desktops, maybe a third system for my, a system for my Windows Server compliance, another tool for my Unix Server compliance, and a fourth or a fifth tool for my mobile device compliance. It's just too many tools.
Thanks, Kimber. That makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Steve, now back to you. Which business applications are used most often on PCs and which are used most often on mobile devices?
Yeah, that's a good question. We actually recently published some research on that specific topic. Based on user-reported frequency of use and ease of use, we found that email, social media, and messaging were commonly accessed on smartphones, while things like calendar scheduling, note-taking, and web surfing were identified as more optimally performed on a tablet. More complex tasks, as I mentioned earlier, like word processing, spreadsheet work, and graphical presentations were overwhelmingly indicated to be only optimally performed on a PC. And this is why we really have to accept the fact that we live in a multi-device world. End users are using devices that are appropriate to the task. They're not going to be carrying heavy laptops with them everywhere they go. They'll be carrying their smartphone everywhere they go, and their tablet when it's convenient to do so. But when they want to do heavy work or more complex tasks, they are going to want to use their PC or laptop. So enterprises need to support all levels of devices.
Thanks, Steve. And do you think we'll ever see broad adoption of Windows on mobile devices?
I just knew somebody was going to ask the Microsoft question. There's been a lot of talk in the media lately about Microsoft's lackluster performance in the consumer market space this year, and many have suggested that this means they will no longer be a serious contender in the mobile space. But I wouldn't count them out yet, at least not in the enterprise market space. According to our survey-based research, Windows tablet adoption is actually increasing in the enterprise market and can be expected to achieve about 25% market share by the end of next year. That's pretty significant in the enterprise market. But the bulk of this growth is coming from particularly large enterprises purchasing the devices for their employees specifically to replace BlackBerry devices, which have, as you're probably aware, have been reducing in their adoption rates dramatically, actually. And a good portion of the reason for this, the reason that the Windows tablets are getting stronger adoption, whereas iPads are pretty much holding steady and even declining a little bit in the enterprise space, is because Apple does not have a strong enterprise program. They don't give discounts to businesses or provide them with enhanced support or anything like that, as opposed to the Windows tablet providers that are actually promoting the devices to businesses and providing incentives. So I wouldn't throw in the towel on Microsoft just yet. I think there's still a role for them to play in this field.
Thanks, Steve. We have one final question. Kimber, this one is for you. You have touched on this a little bit in your presentation, but the question is, who are you seeing as the owners of mobile device management?
Yeah, we might get Steve to weigh in on this one as well. In my work with all of my customers, I would say it still hasn't settled down, and that may be why we're seeing wide adoption of point solution mobile device management. So sometimes it's done at the business unit level by a sales department or a marketing team. In the cases of organizations that had a kind of a telephony team that owned the BES server, sometimes we're finding device management over there. Certainly within the IT ops, user administration, desktop administration area, we find plenty there. A little bit over in the networking world, and in some cases organizations have entire teams dedicated to mobile that span all the way from mobile app development for internal use only mobile apps all the way up into deployment and device management. So it's really, I'm still seeing it as all over the place, and I'm kind of looking forward to when that settles down and a majority of organizations come to a consensus about where in the org chart this falls. And to me it makes the most sense to fall within the operations area, and that, as Steve mentioned, they get managed just like everything else, because eventually we won't be able to tell the difference between them.
Very true, very true. And just to give you some ideas of the adoption rates that our research has shown, in terms of industry verticals, it should be no surprise that we've seen broad adoption of mobile devices in healthcare and education organizations. Projecting forward, though, in other words, going forward a year from now, where we're seeing the biggest growth, very surprisingly, is in the telecom industries. We're looking at doubling the adoption of mobile devices in the telecom industries versus what they have today over the next 12 months. So that's pretty substantial growth and kind of surprising. They will almost equal what we're seeing from healthcare and education today. Internal to organizations, if we're looking at who's buying the devices, end users versus the enterprise, amongst mobile devices, it's about 60% end users are owning the device and then bringing them into the organization, and 40% are the enterprise buying the devices and giving them to their users. That's for smartphones and tablets. When you go to the PC side, or very specifically the laptop side, it's about 80% provided by the business and 20% of the end users bringing them into the organization. So there's definitely this BYOD play, or the devices being used for multiple purposes is definitely very applicable and across the enterprise, across all enterprises.
Great. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Kimber, for your insight on today's topic. And I wanted to thank today's audience for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow, and there in that email you can access the on-demand playback and take a look at a PDF of the speaker slides. Thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.